Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining the session today on ONDC Business Briefing. The session will be taken by Mr. Shireesh Joshi. He's the Chief Business Officer at ONDC. The session will cover details about ONDC, its inception, structure, and basic principles on which ONDC is built upon. Couple of house rules before we begin the session. For smoothly executing the session successfully for everyone, few security controls are in place, such as your microphone and videos are disabled for now. We encourage you to ask as many questions as possible. You can ask questions on the chat box or at the end of the session by raising your hand, and Shirish will be taking those questions. I would also request everyone to please maintain a decorum of the session. Any malicious behavior is highly discouraged, and the user causing the same will be removed from the session. You will be receiving ONDC resources such as copy of presentations, recording, and other resources. Requesting everyone to please fill the attendance sheet. The link is given in the chat box and will be circulated during the session as well. You will be receiving the email within 24 hours because that's how much time it takes for us to process the recording. Please mark your attendance so that we have your email in our database and we are able to send you the resources. Lastly, this is a weekly call. Should you wish your team members or other technical resources to join, they are welcome to do so on any Tuesday from 3 to 4 p.m. I would now request Shirish to please take the session forward. Shirish, over to you.
Thanks, Divya. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the ONDC briefing conversation. ONDC's goal is to dramatically step change e-commerce penetration. Today, a significant part of the retail sector is not digitally enabled. We estimate less than 1% of sellers to actually be digitally visible anywhere. And as a contribution to the total economy, digital commerce contributes in single-digit percentages. The official number 2 years ago was 4.3%. We believe it's up to about 6.5%, 7%. So it's grown, but it's still single-digit percentage. And most of that comes from large urban centers. So the share of rural and small towns is very, very limited. As a team, we are working towards enabling population scale inclusion of merchants and buyers. And all measures of e-commerce, merchandise value, coverage of retailers, number of people shopping, geographic coverage, all of that we expect to step change dramatically from the current very, very small penetration to a much broader acceptance and operation. Now, it's important to understand what ONDC is trying to solve for before you understand the ONDC design. Today, everybody who wants to be on e-commerce does it to access scale. Sellers want to get lots and lots of shoppers to sell products to, and shoppers want a very wide assortment and availability of goods and options to be able to shop from. So everybody is in it for scale. But today, the options for scale are very, very limited, and especially from a seller perspective. Let's say you're a restaurant, you only have maybe a couple of really, really large food ordering platforms. If you are a taxi driver, then again, you have maybe only a couple of large scale platforms. If you're selling household items, maybe you have 2, 3, maximum 4 significant platforms. Otherwise, you really don't have much choice. So choices to access scale are actually very, very limited, and limited also by the type of category you are in. Second, once you are on these marketplaces or these platforms, the terms and conditions are not of your choosing. You have to go by whatever terms and conditions the platform has set. So for example, as a seller of household items, you could be sending the correct product to the correct customer in the correct amount of time, and yet the customer can turn around and say, hey, I don't want this anymore, and decide to send it back. And as a seller, you now have to pay for it to come back to you. The option to this is you can set up your own marketplace. You can set up your own e-commerce website, sorry, not a marketplace. And if you set up your own e-commerce marketplace, e-commerce website, then you can set your own terms and conditions. But the problem with that is that then you do not have traffic. So then you have to spend a lot of budget and time and energy on discoverability and driving traffic, not just the first time, but repeated traffic. And so that can prove to be very expensive. And finally, if you want to create your own e-commerce website, where you're completing the entire platform, having your own inventory, and then accumulating your own customers, setting up that is unviable, if not impossible, for most organizations. In fact, you will see large a large-scale marketplace e-commerce company is also struggling. So one way or the other, any option we have for e-commerce today has its own limitations and makes it suboptimal. The way ONDC is going to solve this is by creating a network design that revolves around two interrelated principles. We are familiar with these principles in our daily lives. We, in fact, see them in many walks of our life. But the one place where we don't see them is in e-commerce. The first of these principles is unbundling. Today, we know e-commerce as something that is done by an entire organization end to end. So no matter whether we're booking a taxi, whether we're ordering food, we're buying something for home, we go to a particular platform and we expect that one platform to do everything that is needed to fulfill our requirement, right? So we are used to a closed network where as a buyer, we are present and sellers are also present. So buyers and sellers have to be within the same platform, and only then a interaction can take place. Now, uh, we have seen unbundling in many other parts of our life. In fact, we accept them as fairly normal. If you think about the entire business process outsourcing industry, that exists because companies have decided that it is more efficient and effective to hand over some work processes to an outside party, because that outside party is an expert in it and they can do it both more effectively and more cost efficiently. So companies outsource many practices, like payroll is often outsourced, customer care is often outsourced, and so on, right? So there are many things that are outsourced simply because not all activities need to be done by the same organization. So that's how we know unbundling. Even in products, we are familiar with unbundling. If you think about all cars, for example, no car maker makes their own tires, right? So you have one set of companies that are car brands and another set of companies that are tire brands, and they join hands to create your full vehicle. So unbundling is something that we experience in many walks of our life. We just don't experience that in e-commerce. So now ONDC is enabling unbundling of e-commerce, where no one entity has to do all the e-commerce activities all by themselves. For this to work and for this to succeed, we need interoperability, because these different entities need to come together to form a complete chain. And for that, you need a communication protocol that enables that interoperability. So everybody understands the commerce language in the same way and is able to bridge that. This protocol or this interoperable language we are familiar with in other walks of our life. One that we do every day is email. So the common email system is based on SMTP, or Simple Mail Transfer Protocol. And any email software that is based on SMTP is compatible with any other. So when we send emails, we don't actually worry about whether which is the email client the other party is using. You can be on Yahoo, somebody can be on Gmail, somebody else can be on Outlook. Different parties can be on different email platforms and yet be able to send and receive email from each other, because the email protocol is set. Right? Everyone is following the same protocol. So in a similar fashion, ONDC has now built a commerce-aware communication or a commerce-aware protocol. And now any buyer on any application can buy from any seller on any other application, as long as both those applications, the buyer application and the seller application, are following ONDC protocols and are connected to the internet. So this is the unbundling idea based on interoperability. The interoperable ONDC protocol allows buyers and sellers to be on different applications and yet be able to complete a transaction. Now, how does this work in a little bit more detail? So if you go to any platform on which you buy something, it typically involves three sets of activities. One are buyer-facing activities, where the buyer is searching for a product, building a cart, making a payment. The second is seller-facing activities, where the seller is managing their catalog, updating their inventory, managing their orders or modifications to orders like a return or a cancellation. And where physical goods are being sold, then there is a delivery or a shipment, which is the goods are picked up from the seller's location and being delivered to the buyer's location. Now, each platform has all these activities, and they're connected to each other through a protocol that is proprietary to that platform. When we go to a different platform, then also you will see all the activities also connected with the protocol, but that's another proprietary protocol, because each of these protocols are proprietary. Components of one system do not talk to components of another system. So a buyer on one platform cannot buy from a seller on another platform, right? So each of these platforms are mutually exclusive and closed universes. Now, once ONDC comes in, what will happen is that you will have different entities do different parts. So if you look at the bottom half of the screen, you will see one party doing retail buyer activities where all the search, building a cart, payment, etc. are being handled. Another entity is doing seller activities, which is all the catalog management, order fulfillment, returns, cancellation, etc. And a third company is doing logistics. All of them are still connected with the protocol. And so the total solution that is getting created is exactly like an individual platform today. Two big differences. One, that each of the business activities is being done by a different company. And second, the protocol that is connecting them is a common open protocol, not a proprietary one. So these are the two differences. But the end solution or the end result is the same. But what this results in is that as more and more organizations now form these unbundled components, now any buyer can buy from a seller or any other application, and either of them can bring in logistics from any other application. So you can have a e-commerce chain completed in any combination, and these combinations can be changed at will because everybody is part of the same network. Now, this is not a mere academic rearrangement of parts. It actually leads to very powerful possibilities. Let's take retail buyer application, for example. Now, you do not need a company to be an e-commerce company to do one of these three activities. Right? So there are many companies, for example, that have a customer base. Stores have customer base, banks have customer base, transportation companies have customer base, social media companies have a user base, media companies have an audience base, telecom companies have a user base. So there are many companies and many different kinds of businesses, not in e-commerce, that have a user base. Many of them have the ability to build their own digital platform, and those that don't can acquire or rent or lease a digital platform, right, with a SaaS provision. So you can have a company that is not in e-commerce, but become a contributor to e-commerce by bringing in their user base as a buyer pool. So many of these companies are already in conversation with us. The buyer applications live with us include a bank, include a payment company, include technology companies, and very soon it may also have a telecom player. And so different kinds of entities are contributing buyers to the network. Similarly, another set of companies will contribute sellers to the network. One very common example of the type of company are the ones that make point of sale software. So when you walk into a store and you get a bill coming out of a computer that is in the store, that software is a point of sale software. That software knows the inventory of that store, knows the catalog of the store, and is able to do the billing. Now, when that software becomes ONDC enabled, that the company that wrote that software incorporates the ONDC APIs, then that net and joins with the network, then that store becomes visible to the buyer pool on the network to order from. So you have potentially a buyer, let's say on a telecom company, ordering product from a seller who is registered with the accounting software company, right? And you'll still be able to complete the transaction. And either party can choose who to deliver from, and there will be a roster of delivery or delivery services brought by delivery provider applications. So what happens is that over a period of time, you get a network which has a large number of buyers, a large number of sellers, and a large number of logistics providers all connected to each other. And depending on your requirement, the appropriate combination can be created. Today, if we look at who's live on the network, so we have 6 buyer applications that are live, and collectively, we have more than 50 million buyers that are now on the network. Likewise, 5 logistics applications and 21 seller applications, contributing more than 25,000 sellers and 15 lakh SKUs. So this is already available on the network, and with time, this will only grow larger. The pipeline also includes many other companies. So you will see those who are joining on the seller side, those who are joining on the buyer side, those who are joining to provide logistic services. And more than 600 companies are at some degree of integration or the other. So from a operation needed for any one organization to be part of e-commerce, now you do not need to necessarily go to a marketplace where you have restricted terms and conditions, nor do you have to spend a lot of money if you build your own website, nor do you have to try and build the entire value chain yourself. Just simply plug into ONDC with whatever business activities you do today. The network will provide all the complementary services, and you will still get a overall solution to get created. Importantly, like with the BPO example, right? So when you provide services out or you outsource certain services outside, you're doing it with somebody who's both very good at it and also does it more cost effectively. So if you go back to the automobile example, automobile makers don't make their own tires because the tire companies make it better and cheaper than if they had to make it themselves, right? That's assuming, of course, that they can quickly get up to speed with the best of tire technology and be comparable. And even if they were, they would not be as effective, or they would definitely not be more effective or as cost effective as the contributors. So the idea is that you allow everyone to do what they're good at, and you allow the full solution to get created by allowing them an easy way to combine with each other. Let's understand now how the network works in a little bit more detail. So this shows you some of the conceptual components uh, of the conceptual components of the network. You have buyers on one side connected with buyer-side applications, and these could be a mobile app, this could be a desktop app, it could be a web page, it could be an IVR, it could also be a voice software like a Siri or an Alexa. So buyer will start their shopping journey on any one of these kinds of applications. These are buyer applications. Depending on what the buyer is searching, the buyer application will broadcast to the network for responses. Now, two things get broadcast: the item that the buyer is searching for and the commercial terms that the buyer application wants. Right? So the buyer application is a business, and the buyer application will have certain expectations of how much commission they want to charge, how much time they will need to settle the money with the seller side, etc. So those are commercial terms. So the buyer application looks at what the buyer is looking for. If the buyer is, let's say, looking for cooking oil, then the buyer application broadcasts to Kirana catalogs. If the buyer is looking for a mobile charger, the buyer application will broadcast to electronic catalogs. If the buyer is looking for, let's say, a t-shirt, the buyer application will broadcast to apparel catalogs. Now, how does the buyer know who the catalogs are? That's where the registry comes in. So ONDC maintains a registry recording each seller, what category of products they are selling in. So ONDC does not keep the entire catalog, but just keeps a note of the category that the seller supports. So when a buyer is looking for a product, the registry helps identify who are all the seller catalogs to which the request has to be broadcast to. When the request is broadcast, remember there were two things that were being broadcast: the product being searched for by the buyer and the terms and conditions, the commercial terms of the buyer application. So the seller application looks at the buyer's requirement, looks at all the catalogs that are registered with them, and identifies if that item is present in at least one of the catalogs. If the item is present and the commercial terms are acceptable, then they will respond to the catalog entry. All such catalog entries get collected by the buyer application and get presented to the buyer. The buyer filters them. If there is a long list, then they'll filter them to narrow down the list, eventually select one, add to cart, make the payment, and start receiving tracking information. So the buyer's journey is exactly how it is on e-commerce today, which is the buyer searches, filters, adds to cart, makes a payment, receives tracking information. The difference is that it got fulfilled by different entities playing different roles. Somebody was playing buyer application, somebody was being a gateway, somebody else was a seller app, then there was ONDC. So different entities came together to fulfill exactly that same solution. The intent behind such open networks is, of course, to be able to do the purpose for which they are built. In case of ONDC, that is to help facilitate e-commerce. But open networks can also interact with other open networks and create additional services or faster versions or more efficient versions of existing services. So one such open network today is Open Credit Enablement Network. And a retailer, let's say, who's on ONDC, if they want to upgrade to being a supermarket and want to avail of a loan, can port their sales history through their seller app to the Open network. And the creditors there can look at their, the sales history, look at the growth in sales, growth in customer base, growth in basket size, and on that basis, be able to offer credit for them to upgrade to supermarket. So in this fashion, you have a component of ONDC interacting with the component of Open and being able to efficiently access credit, as just one example illustration. So now we understand ONDC's purpose, what ONDC is looking to solve, key principles of design, and the structure of how ONDC's components are by different entities. Now let's look at a transaction. And we will look at this transaction three different ways, because ONDC is not a single product. ONDC is actually a capability that allows different components to join hands and complete the solution. Depending on what the buyer is looking for and depending on what the seller is willing to provide, a different combination can get formed. So what I will do is this same transaction that I'm showing on this slide, I will walk you through this transaction three different ways. Let's look at the first way. In the first version, Vijay, who we see as the buyer on top, logs into his buyer application and wants to buy Atta. Let's say his buyer application is his bank application. Let's say he's a State Bank customer. So State Bank Yono app is his buyer application. So Vijay logs into Yono and clicks on the ONDC button, and in the search box, he types Atta. The Yono app through the gateway accesses ONDC registry, and because Atta is a Kirana item, will broadcast that request to all the Kirana stores. All the stores that are willing to supply atta will respond. We are showing two responses here for simplicity. So let's say Gupta Kirana store responds with the 50 rupee quotation, but delivery is not included. Big Basket responds with the 150 rupee quotation and delivery is included. So those are the two choices presented to Vijay. So the first step of the purchase is over, which is he searched and he's been presented with options. So since there are only two options, Vijay looks at them. He thinks he can probably find delivery services for less than 100 rupees. So he chooses Gupta Kirana store. Because he's chosen Gupta Kirana store, now at the second stage, his YONO app recognizes that the seller chosen does not have delivery. Therefore, it will take the seller Gupta Kirana store's location, Vijay's location. So taking these two locations as input, the YONO app fires a second search on the network through the gateway, accesses the registry, now looking not for Kirana catalogs, looking for delivery catalogs. So it has taken two locations as input and it is firing a delivery request. It's like if you book a hotel room, you have to give in your check-in and check-out data as your input, right? And then the hotel responds saying, okay, I have a room or I don't have a room. So there's an input that is provided, which is the pickup location of the seller and the delivery location of the buyer. And with these two locations, a search is fired for delivery solutions between these two locations. And again, responses come back. So we're showing two responses here. Dunzo responds with 50 rupees, Lordship is 70 rupees. And Vijay chooses Dunzo for delivery. So second stage is done. Now that he's chosen both the seller and delivery, he's told to make his payment and he's given whatever options the bank application is enabled. So let's say the bank is enabled UPI or allows cash on delivery and Vijay makes a UPI payment. So he pays 100 rupees, 50 for atta, 50 for delivery. This is one version of the transaction. In this version, there were two sellers. One seller said, I will have delivery. The other seller said, I will not have delivery. These were terms and conditions that were set by the seller, not by an intermediary. So the sellers decided what they will do and what they will not do. Based on that, the buyer made a decision. So all decisions on how this came about were driven either by what Gupta Kirana store had declared as their catalog or what Vijay chose. It was not determined by any intervening buyer application or any seller application. Now let's walk through this a different way. Let's assume Gupta Kirana store, as part of their terms and conditions, have said that in my own PIN code, I can also do delivery. Right? So they may not be able to supply across the length and breadth of the country or even length and breadth of the city, but within their own PIN code, maybe he has a couple of helpers with bicycles who can go and drop it off. Let's also assume that Vijay is in the same PIN code as Gupta Kirana store. So if this is true, then when Vijay selects Gupta Kirana store as part of step 1, at step 2, when he clicks on checkout, when the network query is fired for delivery, 3 responses come back. Dunzo for 50 rupees, Lordship for 70 rupees, and Gupta Kirana store's own delivery for 0 rupees. Right? So 3 options come back because now it meets the terms and conditions that Gupta Kirana store has said. So then Vijay can select between those 3 options. If maybe Gupta Kirana store can't do immediate delivery, so it's free, but it may take some time. The other 2 will do immediate delivery, but they cost money. So he can decide which he wants and can select. So that's another way this can take place. A third way this can take place is, let's say Gupta Kirana store decides to manage delivery on their own. They do not want to let the buyer worry about delivery. So while they themselves are only a atta supplier, Gupta Kirana store may decide that I will buy the delivery services on ONDC once Vijay confirms the order. So as soon as Vijay confirms the order, then Gupta Kirana store now, instead of Vijay, Gupta Kirana store's application will fire a delivery query to the network. Gupta Kirana store will order that delivery. And as far as Vijay the buyer is concerned, he only made a choice of the store. So now you have 3 versions of this transaction. All 3, Vijay is the buyer. In all 3, Gupta Kirana store is a seller. But the combination that came together is different in each case. And the choice of what that combination is driven by what Vijay wanted and what Gupta Kirana store was willing to provide. No intermediary, no platform, no central entity was making any decision as to how that combination will take place, or rather what that combination is. They only helped whatever was chosen, they only helped that to get fulfilled. Right? So that's an important distinction when you look at transaction ONDC, which is the power rests with the buyer and the seller, not with the intervening platforms. If you want to try placing an order, we have these applications that are live today. And so make sure as you leave, you try one of these out. When we send the deck, you will have links, but some of these are known to you. So let's say if you already have a Paytm application and you are in one of our live locations, you'll be able to shop through that. Or you can go to the websites of IDC First Bank or Craftsvilla or MyStore and be able to do it. Right? So you can actually place test orders and try out the network yourself. Now, a buyer or a seller need not be 2 different people. The same entity can be both a buyer or a seller. So for example, in the one of the versions of Gupta Kirana store, we say that Gupta Kirana store is selling atta to Vijay on the network, but Gupta Kirana store is buying delivery service on the network. Right? So you're selling atta but you're buying delivery services. That can be a combination. So Gupta Kirana Store is both a buyer and a seller, but they're just buying one thing and selling another thing. Or they could be buying and selling the same thing. So Gupta Kirana Store could be buying from a distributor the same atta that they are selling forward to Vijay. Right? So the same entity can be both a buyer and a seller. When we began ONDC, we began with grocery and food and beverage as the first two categories. But as we've progressed, we're now in conversation with many categories, and soon many of these will be live on the network. Soon meaning literally in the next few days or weeks. And when that happens, now we will have examples that today are not possible on any marketplace. So let's say a person who's working on a job in Delhi gets posted by their company to Kerala. This person now needs to do multiple things: buy a suitcase, buy a flight ticket, buy a service apartment because it's a 1 year stay. And maybe because the local language is different, they want to learn the local language as well. Today, they will be able to do this only by going to 4 different places. So for suitcase, go to 4 different places or multiple places to decide where they want to buy a suitcase. For flight ticket, go to a travel portal. For service apartment, go to an accommodation portal. For language lessons, maybe do an internet search. So 4 needs, 4 different journeys, 4 different platforms, 4 different experiences, 4 different checkouts. Once all these are on ONDC, then it will be as easy as add suitcase to cart, add flight ticket to cart, add service apartment with check-in, check-out date to cart, add a 10-lesson introductory Malayalam language course to cart, 1 checkout, and you're done. Today, this is not possible on any of these platforms individually because each platform specializes in a particular category of product or services. But ONDC will encompass all, and therefore will make such an experience possible. So when we look at benefits for buyers and sellers and technology companies, for buyers, as this example illustrated, you have a single platform access to all domains. And more than that, you can see all sellers in each domain. So a customer has a unified experience for buying anything with wider options for price, delivery, add-ons, hyperlocal fulfillment, etc. And importantly, you do not have to now have multiple apps to do shopping for various kinds of items. Through a single application, you can do all of it. The main differentiator is going to be buyer experience, which is all buyers see all sellers. So no longer can a buyer application claim that I have a unique set of exclusive products or I have maximum number of sellers, because the entire universe of sellers and their catalog is common across all buyer applications. So the only differentiation is the buyer experience that they can create. Sellers have a host of benefits. For a seller, one advantage, of course, is through a single registration, they are now discoverable by the entire buyer universe. You do not have to register on multiple platforms. Today, when a seller wants to access many buyers, they go and register on multiple marketplaces. But on ONDC, you just need to register on one. And through that one registration, you can access all the buyers. So your own organizational administrative costs are lower. Second, you will partner with other entities who provide other services. And like the BPO example, each of them is doing a more effective job, also a more cost-effective job. And so when a consumer pays a total price for a particular transaction, the amount of realization that a seller can gain because the other services are coming less expensively becomes much better. Also, a seller can decide their rules and terms and conditions. So they can decide that, am I willing to accept orders from the whole country or only my city or only my PIN code? And then whether I accept returns on terms of no conditions, or I'll accept returns only if there is damage, or I'll accept returns only if it's in my own PIN code so I can deliver or swap it myself. So they can determine their own terms and conditions. So all these factors, which is access to more buyers, lower administrative costs, better price realization, and autonomy on tools and conditions, help to increase profitability. Beyond this, seller applications will also share business insights. So the application on which Gupta Kirana Store is registered will go and tell Mr. Gupta that, hey, here are the top 100 Kirana items being sold. You have only 80 of them. Add the remaining 20 and you'll have more orders. So analytics will be shared by seller applications to help sellers grow better, because that helps the seller application also improve their own earnings. Another very important aspect of ONDC is portable network-wide reputation. So reputation is a key factor that enables scale. Scale happens when consumers buy from shops that we did not even know of before. Right? If we are limited to shops we know, then the scale of commercial activity gets limited. But if consumers can buy from anyone, including people they did not know, then you have a chance for increasing scale of e-commerce. So that's a very important factor in e-commerce platforms today, which is the reputation of sellers and products. But the reputation of sellers and products are a result of the effort by the seller or by the product maker. Today, that reputation is locked inside a platform. So if a seller, let's say, has to go and register on a new platform, then they have to start from zero. They can't have the benefit of the reputation that they themselves have built. On ONDC, reputation is available to those who have built it, and thus be able to benefit from it no matter where they are. So if they leave one seller application and join ONDC through a different seller application, they will be able to carry the reputation with them and be able to access the customers on the basis of the uh, the the reputation that they have built. Finally, no disintermediation. Today, sellers are worried, especially small sellers are worried that marketplaces deal with thousands of sellers like them, will have access to all the seller data and pricing information, and then be able to build their own store brand or supply chain and replace those sellers. So they get disintermediated. In ONDC, no one party has all data, no one party has all the information. And so there is no opportunity for disintermediation. And finally, for technology companies, opportunity to scale up their technology on using the benefit of e-commerce without having to build an entire e-commerce solution. So one example I can give as an illustration is, let's say there's a company that's very good at image processing, and today they may be providing image processing solutions to, let's say, the fingerprint tools that we do for entry into organizations, or the devices that power our KYC when we, let's say, get a new SIM card. So they could be building that image processing software, or they could be doing image processing software for medical industry, like scanning X-rays and providing an initial diagnosis. So they could be providing various tools. Now, such a company can make use of ONDC and benefit from e-commerce. For example, they can build a cataloging tool for a handcart vendor. Even the lowest of mobile users know how to take pictures or how to use their mobile camera, how to speak on the phone, and how to send basic text messages. So all this Thelawala has to do is to download this software and aim that mobile phone camera at their thela, and the handcart gets scanned, and the software identifies what is potato, brinjal, cauliflower, lady's fingers, etc. And not only identified, render it in 25 Indian languages, and all the vendor has to do is enter how many rupees a kilo, and his catalog is ready. And let's say if the commercial terms are that the software is free for download and only, let's say, 0.1% of every transaction to be paid, then for every 100 rupees, the vendor has to pay just 10 paisa to the software company, which I'm sure they will not mind. So suddenly you have an image processing company still doing only image processing, but being able to benefit from e-commerce and leverage scale of e-commerce. So in this fashion, technology companies also can benefit from ONDC, scale up whatever they're doing, and need not have to build an entire e-commerce solution to be able to take advantage. Having explained what ONDC is, a quick look at what ONDC is not. ONDC is an open network. It's not an application or a platform. So nobody will log into ONDC to buy or sell. They will log into buyer seller applications, not onto ONDC directly. ONDC is a network that connects those applications. It's a capability, it's an infrastructure. Because it's a capability, it actually results in infinite models. It's not a product, right? So it's not a fixed model. It is infinite models, and therefore it's very fertile for innovation. So any business can create any combination and be able to do it efficiently because the other parts are already available. There is no central intermediary. In fact, it's a decentralized network and eliminates the need for a central intermediary. And we operate as a market and community-led initiative. And so we engage with the ecosystem at each stage, and we get the benefit of their experience. So a lot of things that are required to make a network effective have already been solved for. Right? So, and we'll talk about some of those examples. But therefore, we benefit from what everybody else has created, and we build and are building ONDC on the back of that collective industry experience, rather than having to invent everything from the start. ONDC is an initiative of the Commerce Ministry, and the Honorable Minister certainly expects ONDC will democratize commerce, making it from platform-centric to a network-centric model, and therefore enable small sellers to be equally discoverable as big sellers and allow them also to benefit from e-commerce. We began with advisory council being set up. Many of these names are familiar. A lot of experience in technology, in finance, in government sector, in digital infrastructure at population scale. And this community was set up. Advisory council was set up in middle of 2021. In a couple of months, we had a rollout plan approved by the Honorable Minister. By December, we had completed the first proof of concept of the unbundled interoperable transaction. And December was also when the company was registered as a Section 8 company. By March, the network was live. In April, the transactions began, and I'll explain alpha and beta in a minute. The first transactions began. Over the next few months, we expanded to other cities and domains, and by end of September, we had also done the beta launch. Alpha launch is where we are inviting people to try out the network. This is not public at large. So the network is fully ready. Real people are placing real orders, making payments. Goods are being picked up from seller locations and shipped to their location. So all of that is taking place. But these are people that we have invited. Beta launch, which is what we did in end of September, is where the public can place the order. So it's not people that we have specifically invited. Today, ONDC is live with sellers in 172 cities, and we are beta live in 2 cities, Bangalore, parts of Bangalore and part of Meerut. So that brings us to the end of this presentation. What all of you have to do is to evaluate your role. Do you want to come as a buyer application, as a seller application, or do you want to be just a technology service provider? All of you, as Divya explained at the beginning, is that in the chat box, we've placed our attendance sheet. Make sure you have the accurate email ID for yourself in that attendance sheet. To each of you, we will send a recording of this call. We will send a copy of this deck, and we will also send a profile form. Please fill that profile form. It's not a very complicated form. It's fairly simple, but it's an important one. Share with us who you intend to be out of these roles. What is your domains, which categories, etc. you're live in, which locations do you want to be live in, so we get a sense of who you are. And then we will invite you as appropriate to the subsequent forums, and invariably it will include the technical briefing call, because somebody on your team will need to understand what the APIs are, what the testing protocol is, MVP, etc. So we'll invite you to a technical briefing call. For anything else, write to team@ondc.org. One of the most common questions that comes in this briefing is, how do I join? So as a seller application, as a buyer application, or as a TSP. So if you're building that application, then, as I said, you have to add your email in the attendance sheet. You will receive the presentation, the recording, and the profile sheet link. In that, please include your business details, the role you intend to play, and the technology contact. And we will invite then the business and tech contact to communication channels for the next steps. If you don't want to be a builder of any of these applications, you're just a manufacturer or a craftsman or a retailer or a brand, and you just simply want to sell but don't want to create your own app, then you go to the website ondc.org, click on network participants, contact any seller app that is live, and they will onboard your catalog and you'll be able to sell it. So with that, let me move to the chat box and start taking the questions there. Okay, the first question is from Abhishek Jory. Is the catalog geolocation enabled? So yes, there is a location that is provided. Depending on the category, the seller and buyer applications establish the appropriate delivery system and where is it serviceable. So the buyer's location, once captured, can be informed whether a particular store can service to that area or not. So geolocation is enabled. Next question from Abhishek. Does Gupta Kirana Store maintain a server to reply to ONDC queries? No. So a seller who's registered on a seller application will not maintain a server. The seller application also may not maintain a server. The seller application may be hosted on a public server as well. So maintaining a server is a choice, not a requirement. Ravi Lakotia's question. How are products rank in search response in my pin code? Are there any guidelines? The buyer app can choose to rank them appropriately. But Ravi, please remember that just because you can order the ranking does not mean you will play with it at will. One very relevant example to think of is think about travel applications, right? Where you do flight bookings. Now, what do you think these applications can do in terms of flight ranking? Right? So let's say you're searching for a Delhi-Bombay flight and you search across multiple travel applications. Honestly, whatever sequence that they order may not be relevant. So for example, when I look at flights, I first go to the filter set section and I click on non-stop. Once I've clicked on that, then I sort flights by departure time, because usually I want to travel at a particular time. And so that's what matters to me, right? So after I have done that, then I go to that time band and I select. So remember that because the seller universe is identical across buyer applications, good buyer applications will actually make it easy for the buyer to make the decision and not force a decision. And the travel industry is one example where that happens. Jasmeet's question, any buy box logic for search results ranking? Uh, so yes, buyer applications can choose to create paid positions and charge for it. But again, the question becomes, why would you pay for it, right? And so think again back to the travel applications. If let's say you were, the new airline Akasa, and you wanted to promote your new Bombay, Kolkata sector, would you do paid ranking search, or you would not, right? And so in open networks, where the seller universe is identical, the need for doing paid ranking goes down quite a bit. The paid behavior has been driven by closed platforms because they own and have complete control access over the buyer universe, and because you have access to an audience, therefore they monetize it in that fashion. So in theory, a paid box is possible, but think hard about whether it will actually be needed or not. Jasmeet Narang's question, any issues with order fulfillment users would raise with concern with ONDC or with the seller directly? Neither, they will raise it with the buyer application. Let's look at what happens, let's say, when you make payments, right? So you have an account with the bank, you make a payment to another party who has an account with another bank. If the other party does not receive your money, who do you go to? You don't go to another party, you don't go to the other bank, you go to your bank because you have initiated it through your interface. So you will always go to the buyer application on which you have initiated. The buyer application will handle the rest. Shuru App's question, are APIs to build buyer applications open? Yes, the APIs are open. Can anyone build? Anyone can build. You don't need an approval to build, Shuru. But in order for you to be brought live on the network, we will test and validate that you have fulfilled the requirements and that you have enabled all the features that are needed. And we will only test for that. So yes, at the final going live stage, an approval is required. But to get started, you don't need a approval process. So Ravi, I've answered your question as well. Shruti's question, what is the criteria for onboarding for buyer and a seller app? So you will have to join the technical briefing. We will explain what all has to be done. We will explain what the MVP product you have to develop. And once you build that, then there'll be testing required. So that's one part of it. Your application will be tested and validated. Second is, as a business entity, you will have to sign the network participant agreement, unless you are a technology service provider. So if you're a TSP, then once your software is ready, you're done. But if you're going to be a buyer or a seller app, that is, you're a participant on the network, then you also have to sign a network participant agreement. Once you fulfill both, which is you've signed the agreement and you've built your application, then that's when you go live. Abhishek Zuri's question, as a small seller, I register on Paytm, upload my catalog, and my catalog is available on my shop as well. So how come customer will buy my product from my shop, and then how will Paytm make money? So first of all, on an open network, you do not need to be registered on multiple platforms, right? So once you're on one platform, you are visible to all buyers. There is no additional benefit of registering exactly the same catalog on multiple seller applications. Today, you register on different marketplaces because each marketplace is a closed universe. And we know that the buyer universe is not exactly identical. But on ONDC, all buyers on all buyer platforms are pooled together to form a single buyer universe. Similarly, all sellers on all seller platforms are pooled together to form a single seller universe. So there is no benefit for being on multiple platforms. In fact, you will increase your own headache by being on multiple platforms, because then you have two sets of catalogs, two sets of presences to maintain. And importantly, your reputation will be split across those two identities. So there really is no benefit for having multiple seller presences. Shruti Jain's question, what is the cost of getting API for seller or buyer app to be able to connect with API? There is no cost. The APIs are public information. They're free. ONDC is a not-for-profit organization. So there is no cost for building these applications. Is the buyer metadata like an item added to cart persistent in ONDC network if the buyer visits again or buyer application? So the buyer information is maintained by the buyer application. ONDC does not keep a record of who the buyers are. The buyer applications have their customers and they maintain this information. So they may want to maintain profile and past history for providing a superior experience. And only then it's only with them, nobody else. Abhishek Jory's question, if a seller takes the money but doesn't complete the order, who's responsible for refund? Yes, the seller app is responsible. So the seller app is a network participant. the seller is contacted through the seller app. So yes, if the seller takes the order, takes the money, but doesn't complete the order, as far as the network is concerned, the seller app is responsible. Shuru app's question: how about only showcase product from my area? I'm not sure what you're. So are you thinking you are a buyer application? If you're a buyer application, depending on what the buyer is searching for, you may decide to showcase only from the area or not from that area. In some categories like food, it makes sense to showcase only from that area because you want the food to be delivered quickly. But let's say if you're looking for a particular type of garment, let's say looking for a good leather jacket, there is no benefit in limiting it to stores only from that area. So as a buyer application, you have to make sure that your buyer is satisfied, and whatever actions need to help the buyer be satisfied, that's what you have to undertake. But yes, if you say that I will be only a local shopping application and I will only show local stores, that's entirely your prerogative. Only thing is that you'll probably not have a very satisfied customer base if that's all you show. Integrated information is on the screen, Sandeep, so you can look at that. If you are a payment gateway platform, payment itself, we do not directly integrate on ONDC. You'll have to integrate it on the application. So if you're only a payment gateway, then look at the buyer and seller apps that are on our network, and you can contact them. So look at the bottom half of the screen, go to the network participants tab, look at the seller and buyer applications, and connect with them to integrate. Abhilash Palandurkar's question: can sole proprietor build seller buyer apps? Yes, you can be an individual and do this as well. Is there a requirement on type of entity for building? So yes, you will need to be a registered entity, because when we sign on board, then there has to be a legally verifiable identity that we can go to in order to hold the party responsible. So yes, you will have to be a registered entity of some kind to register on the network. Aina Singh's question: for flights, there are limited flight options. For in the case of pens, there are large number of sellers in any pin code nationally. The buyers are ranking them. How can sellers ensure they are still relevant? I'm not sure what the question is. Buyers are ranking, then how can sellers ensure they're still? I didn't understand your question, Aina. So when you're looking for pens and you make a search, let's say there's a generic idea of pen, or there may be something very, very specific. So I may want a blue gel refill based pen. Right? So that may be a very specific one. I will get to see all the sellers. Then I, as a buyer, can decide who I want to buy from. Do I want to buy the best rated? Do I want to buy from the fastest delivery? Do I want to buy from the cheapest? That's my decision as a buyer. And depending on what my thinking is at that moment, I will choose to rank them. So in order for sellers to make sure they're relevant, they have to make sure that the products that they're selling are relevant to at least some buyers, because only then you show up in those searches. So that's true regardless of e-commerce or otherwise. If you're selling products that are relevant, you will be relevant to buyers. If you're selling products that are not relevant, you will eventually go bankrupt. Ravi Lakhotia's question: can a technology provider build gateway? Yes, they can. What are the guidelines for the same? So currently we have not opened the gateway, but in some time in the future we will. But we're happy to create a conversation between you and our tech team. So when you fill out your profile sheet, express this as your information, and we will connect you. Likewise with open data, ledger, and reputation system. So do fill the profile sheet, express this as your interest, and we'll connect you appropriately. Eves de Belo's question: what is the cost of using network API calls? There is no cost. It is whatever data cost you pay to your internet service provider. That's the extent of your cost. Abhishek Jori's question: is there some common star rating feedback available so customers across buyers can share this? Yes, so we are building a common reputation model, and that will be network-wide available. Aina Singh's question: for smaller products, there are a lot of options, unlike flights. Yes, Aina, so I think I've answered your question. There are lots of options. All the options will come back as a list to the buyer. The buyer application has to help their buyers make the selection efficiently. And so they should provide good filters that allow them to narrow down the list and eventually select. Mohit Manuja's question: so Vijay has placed an order for a heater and has chosen Dunzo as delivery partner. In case the item is not available at the time of pickup, how will the delivery partner be informed? Will there be a connection between the seller and the delivery partner? Yes, all these are taking place through APIs on the network, Mohit. And so let's say the buyer has chosen the delivery partner. The delivery partner and seller are through ONDC now exchanging the information, and there is an expectation of pickup time that is being negotiated. So the seller will communicate the pickup time and readiness to the delivery partner. On notification that the item is ready, the delivery partner will pick it up. So that exchange is taking place between them. And so that brings me to the last question. Okay, Dheeraj's question, how to register for Seller App, how to get API keys. The answer is on your screen, Dheeraj. So please read what's on the screen. I've talked about that a few times, and you will also get that from the recording. So that brings me to the end. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your questions. Please make sure you've done the steps, which is the ONDC team ID has posted the link. We've posted the profile form. So the attendance sheet form, please make sure that you include your email address and we'll be able to send you all of that. We've also sent you links of the buyer application. So in case you would like to shop through the network, click on any of the links and enjoy your shopping. Thank you all. Good day.
Thanks, Shireesh. Thank you everyone for joining. I hope, just a reminder that you have filled your attendance sheets. Otherwise, you will not receive the email. I repeat, you will not be receiving an email if you do not fill the attendance sheet. Thank you.